My name is Mark Willis. I'm 46 years old. Born and raised in Denver, Colorado. On paper, my life looked almost ordinary. Steady job in construction management. A home in the suburbs. My wife Rachel, and our 2 kids. It was the kind of life most middle-aged men would consider stable. But underneath that normal picture, something was off. I was exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Headaches drilled into my skull like someone pressing a nail into bone. Sometimes I'd feel fine, and then suddenly, a sharp pain would strike out of nowhere. Rachel kept telling me, "Mark, you need to see a doctor." But like a lot of stubborn men my age, I brushed it off. I told myself it was stress, maybe dehydration, or just getting older. Truthfully, I didn't want to admit I might be fragile. Men in my family, my dad, my uncles, they all worked until they dropped. They never slowed down, never complained, and I felt like I had to carry that same toughness. It was a Thursday night in late spring. Denver's air still had that crisp chill, even though the days were warming up. I had just finished dinner and lay on the couch, flipping between news channels. The anchors were arguing about politics, the economy, and inflation. Rachel was in the kitchen, washing dishes, and the kids were upstairs arguing over who left Legos on the carpet. Just another regular evening, or at least, it should have been. Then it hit me. A stabbing pain ripped through my chest like someone jammed a hot iron between my ribs. I tried to call out, but my throat was dry. No sound came out. I pushed myself off the couch, my vision blurring, my legs buckled under me. And in that instant, I knew this wasn't just another headache. This was life or death. I remember Rachel's scream. It sliced through the kitchen like glass shattering. She dropped a plate. It crashed on the floor, pieces scattering. I tried to reach for her, my fingers clawing at the carpet, but my body gave out. The last thing I saw was her face, wide-eyed and terrified, as she grabbed her phone to call 911. Everything faded. The sound of her voice, the house, even the pounding in my chest. It all slipped away until there was nothing but silence. For a second, I thought, so this is how it ends. But then something unexpected happened. Out of the silence came light. It wasn't the light of the kitchen, or the glow of an ambulance. It was something far brighter, far more alive, and it was pulling me in. The moment that light pulled me in, I felt everything around me disappear. There was no ceiling above, no floor beneath. It was as if I was floating in the middle of nowhere, suspended like a feather in a windless sky. Yet strangely, I wasn't afraid. The pain in my chest, the heaviness in my head, it was all gone. What replaced it was warmth, like standing too close to a fire on a winter night, but without the burn. The light wasn't just light, it felt alive. It pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and welcoming. And then, through that brilliance, I saw a figure. At first, it was just a silhouette, but the closer it came, the more my spirit recognized him. His presence carried authority, but not the kind that frightens. It was the kind that makes you want to fall to your knees because you know you're in front of something holy. "Mark," the voice said, not booming, not harsh, but strong enough to shake my very soul. "Your time is not over. I will show you what is coming." I didn't hear it with my ears. I felt it inside me, as if every cell in my body absorbed his words. And the moment he spoke, tears I didn't even know I had began streaming down my face. A flood of emotion hit me all at once, grief, regret, but also an overwhelming peace. I thought about Rachel, about our 2 kids. I thought about how I had wasted so many nights scrolling through my phone, drowning in work emails, worrying about bills, instead of sitting at the dinner table really listening to my family. In that light, I saw how blind I had been. Jesus reached out his hand. It wasn't a physical touch the way we think of it, but when his hand rested on my shoulder, it was like electricity surged through me, except instead of pain, it was pure life, strength, clarity, love. It felt like everything broken in me was being rewired in an instant. Then, In a blink, everything around me shifted. 1 second I was standing before him. The next I was high above the earth, looking down from space. I could see continents spinning slowly, the deep blue oceans stretching wide. At first, it looked peaceful, almost like the view you'd see from NASA's images. But then, something dark began creeping over the land, thick, black, and unnatural, like a curtain falling across the world. Alarms rang out from every direction. Not just one or two, but millions all at once. Fire sirens, military horns, police signals, blending into a terrifying symphony of chaos. I saw people scatter like ants, some rushing indoors, others running aimlessly through the streets. And in that moment, my heart raced with a dread I can't put into words. Then his voice broke through the chaos, steady and commanding. This is the new lockdown, Mark. Unlike anything the world has ever faced, it will last 3 days. My breath caught. 3 days? And then he added, but on the 4th day, everything will change forever. The moment Jesus spoke those words, 3 days, then the 4th, I felt my knees weaken. My mind raced, trying to grab hold of the meaning. 3 days of what? Lockdown? Darkness? Chaos? And the 4th day? What could possibly happen that would change everything forever? My breath felt shallow, like I was standing on the edge of a storm I couldn't escape. He looked at me, his eyes cutting through every doubt I carried. Mark, what I am about to show you is not to frighten you, but to prepare you. When it comes, many will be caught off guard. They think they still have time. They think these prophecies are just stories. But the time is closer than they realize. Suddenly, the scene shifted again. I was no longer looking at Earth from space. I was dropped right into the middle of Denver. Standing on Colfax Avenue, people were going about their normal lives. Parents buckled kids into SUVs. Workers carried coffee cups. Traffic crawled along the highway. It was so ordinary that for a moment I wondered if the vision was fading. Then, without warning, every phone buzzed at once. Every TV flipped to a red alert screen. Radios blared the same chilling words. Global emergency. Everyone must stay inside immediately. No explanation. No details. Just a command. The city froze. Drivers pulled over. Shoppers abandoned carts. I could feel the weight of panic pressing down like a heavy blanket. The first hours were pure chaos. Some laughed nervously, calling it another COVID rerun. But when police sirens echoed and military trucks rolled through downtown, the laughter died fast. People rushed stores, pushing carts full of bottled water, canned beans, and toilet paper, just like the early pandemic days. But this time, the fear was sharper, more desperate. I saw families dragging their kids inside, slamming doors, drawing curtains. Some homes glowed with a strange peace, almost like invisible walls of protection. In those houses, people knelt on their living room carpets, hands clasped in prayer. I could see angels standing guard over them, tall, steady, unshaken. But other houses were filled with shouting, arguing, and fear. Darkness hovered over their rooftops like a storm cloud. Jesus spoke again, his voice steady and piercing. This is the first day. A line will be drawn. My people will know peace, but those far from me will be consumed by fear. This day will reveal who they truly are. His words rang inside me like a bell that wouldn't stop. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the vision froze like a paused video. Jesus turned to me and said, "Watch closely, Mark. What you have seen is only the beginning." The vision picked up again, and I found myself standing right back in the middle of Denver. The city looked the same, yet the air felt heavy, charged like before a summer thunderstorm. People were still rushing, kids with backpacks bouncing, commuters honking on I-25, coffee in one hand, phones in the other. But then, the sirens began. Not one or two, but hundreds. Fire trucks, police cars, military alarms. They echoed off the tall glass buildings downtown, bouncing from block to block until the city itself sounded like a giant alarm clock going off at once. Even above the noise, a deeper sound filled the air, the voice of fear creeping into every heart. Suddenly, every phone in sight lit up. Screens flashed in unison. Global emergency. Stay inside immediately. People froze mid-step. Cars swerved onto sidewalks. Shoppers abandoned carts right in the middle of Target aisles. It felt like someone had pressed the pause button on human life. At first, a few laughed nervously, muttering, "This is just another COVID scare." But when the helicopters thundered low overhead and armored trucks blocked intersections, the laughter vanished. Panic swept through the streets like wildfire. I saw people stampeding into grocery stores, shelves emptying in minutes. Bottled water, bread, and canned beans disappeared first. Fights broke out in parking lots over bags of rice or boxes of cereal. A man shoved another so hard he crashed into a stack of paper towels, the whole thing toppling like dominoes. Yet, when I looked closer, I noticed something incredible. Some houses, tucked away on quiet side streets, glowed faintly. Inside, families were kneeling together, hands clasped, lips moving in prayer. There was no panic in their eyes, only a calm that didn't make sense in the middle of chaos. And around them, I saw them, angels, tall, radiant, standing guard like soldiers who could not be moved. But across the street, the picture was completely different. Families screamed at each other. Children sobbed. Parents threw accusations over empty cupboards. Darkness seemed to coil around those houses, pressing in like a storm cloud no one could push away. The difference was as clear as day. Peace on one side, despair on the other. Jesus' voice broke through again, not from the sky but directly into my spirit. This is the first day. Mark, a line is being drawn. Those who know me will stand firm. Those who don't will crumble in fear. This is how the hearts of men are revealed. And as his words settled in me, I realized this was only the beginning. The first day had ended, but deep inside I sensed it. The second day would be worse. Much worse. As the first day of lockdown drew to a close, I noticed a stark divide. Two kinds of homes. Two kinds of people. It wasn't about wealth, race, or where someone lived in the city. It wasn't about who had the most food or the biggest generator. The difference was spiritual, invisible, yet undeniable. In one home, I saw a family gathered in their living room. The curtains were drawn, but inside, a warm glow filled the space. Parents knelt beside their children, hands clasped tightly, their lips moved in prayer, their voices soft but steady. The kids, wide-eyed and nervous at first, slowly relaxed as peace washed over them. Their house felt like a fortress, not because of locked doors, but because of faith. Across the street, the atmosphere was the opposite. A father pounded his fist on the table, shouting at his teenage son. The mother paced the kitchen, opening and closing empty cupboards. Children screamed, tugging on her shirt, crying for food. Fear was a wildfire inside that home, consuming everyone. And above the roof, I saw darkness coil like smoke, pressing down as if the house itself were suffocating. Jesus' voice came to me again. Mark, fear multiplies where faith is absent. My angels surround those who call on my name, but those who reject me are left unprotected. This is the great revealing. Who truly trusts, and who only pretends? His words struck me like a hammer. I realized it wasn't just about survival, it was about exposure. Hearts were being unveiled. I thought about my own home back in Denver. Would Rachel be praying, clinging to hope? Would my kids sense that shield of peace? Or would fear invade like it had in so many other families? The thought pierced me. It wasn't just a vision anymore, it felt personal. I remembered 2001, the week after September 11th. Churches overflowed with people who hadn't stepped inside for years. Neighbors prayed together on front lawns. America was shaken, and for a brief time, faith reawakened. But as months passed, the fire cooled, and most went back to their old lives. This felt similar, but much heavier. It wasn't just a national tragedy. It was worldwide. and it cut deeper than buildings falling. As the night stretched on, the divide between homes grew sharper. In some, hymns rose softly, voices quivering but steady. In others, televisions blared, news anchors shouting conflicting updates, fueling more fear. Some reached for Bibles buried under dust. Others reached for liquor bottles to numb the silence. Two kinds of homes, two kinds of choices. And then, as midnight approached, Jesus whispered again, "This is only day one. Mark, tomorrow, the air itself will change." His words sank deep into me. What could possibly be worse than this? When morning came in the vision, I could tell instantly that something was different. The sunlight didn't look right. It wasn't a bright Colorado morning with the Rockies standing tall against a blue sky. No, the light was dim, filtered through a strange gray haze, like the whole atmosphere had been tainted. I drew in a breath, and even the air felt heavy, as if every lungful weighed more than it should. The city was quieter than the night before. No traffic on the interstate. No kids outside. Curtains stayed drawn tight. News anchors on TV tried to sound calm, but their voices cracked. Their eyes betrayed the fear they tried to hide. Government officials issued orders 1 hour, then reversed them the next. It was confusion at the highest level. People could feel it, even if they couldn't explain it. Some said the silence outside was so deep it rang in their ears. Others said it felt like a weight pressing down on their chests. I saw neighbors peeking through blinds, their faces pale, whispering to each other across the street but too afraid to step outside. Inside some homes, I saw prayer meetings springing up. Small groups gathered in living rooms, singing old hymns their grandparents once sang in country churches. Some just wept quietly, hands raised, clinging to faith like a lifeline. And their houses glowed again, a soft light that cut through the haze. But in other homes, it was different. Arguments broke out over food, over batteries, over who used up the last gallon of milk. Fathers snapped at their children. Mothers buried their faces in their hands. Some turned up the TV, hoping for answers, but the broadcasts contradicted each other until no one knew what to believe. Fear spread like an infection. Then I was taken into another scene. A hidden room where world leaders sat around a long table. There were no cameras, no speeches, just arguments. Some shouted that this was their chance to unite the world under one government. Others fought for their own agendas, more concerned about power than about people. Jesus whispered to me, "Even they do not see the full picture, but their choices prepare the stage for what is to come." I felt the pressure of the second day growing heavier. It wasn't just about empty shelves or military blockades anymore. It was about the human soul. I could see it as clearly as an X-ray. Some clung to God with all their strength, while others collapsed into selfishness, greed, and despair. By the end of the second day, exhaustion spread across the city. The air was thick, the silence suffocating. And then Jesus spoke once more. "Tomorrow will be the hardest day. Mark, the third day will press the world to its breaking point." When the third day began, the world no longer looked like the world I knew. The skies above Denver were not just gray anymore. They were swallowed by a darkness so thick it felt alive. The sun was nowhere to be found. Even the streetlights seemed smothered, their glow reduced to faint circles on the pavement. I tried to take a breath, but the air felt heavy, almost poisonous, as if every inhale dragged stone into my lungs. The city was silent, not quiet like an early Sunday morning, but an eerie silence that pressed against the eardrums. No cars, no planes, no footsteps on sidewalks, just nothing. It was the kind of silence that makes you think twice about speaking out loud, afraid your own voice might break something fragile. Inside the homes, two realities unfolded. In some, families huddled close, whispering prayers. Their living rooms became sanctuaries, filled with hymns sung through tears. Even in the suffocating dark, their houses shone faintly, like lighthouses on a black sea. Angels stood by their doors, swords drawn, steady as stone. But in other homes, Despair took over. I saw a mother rocking back and forth on the floor, hands covering her ears as her children screamed. Fathers cursed at the darkness, slamming fists against the wall as though they could punch the night away. Some people screamed until their voices broke. Others just sat in stunned silence, staring at nothing. And then I heard them. Whispers. Not human voices, but something darker. Shadows moved through the streets, circling homes like predators. They whispered lies into ears. You're forgotten. God doesn't care. You're already lost. The words slithered into hearts, fueling panic, feeding despair. Jesus' voice cut through. This is what judgment feels like for those who reject me. I thought about Rachel and the kids. Would they be glowing with peace, guarded by angels, or would they be crushed under this same darkness? My heart ached, because this vision wasn't just about strangers, it was about every family, mine included. The hours dragged on like years. The silence was so thick it felt like time itself had stopped. By late evening, no more news broadcasts came through. Phones were dead, radios silent. It was as if the entire world had been cut off from itself, frozen in a breathless pause. And then Jesus spoke again, his presence steady in the chaos. Mark, when this day ends, the world will never be the same. But on the fourth day, his voice trailed, and my spirit trembled, knowing something beyond imagination was about to break through. When the dawn of the fourth day arrived, it didn't look like any sunrise I had ever known in Colorado. The horizon didn't brighten slowly. Instead, the sky seemed to split open with a brilliance that poured in like liquid gold. It wasn't the sun. It wasn't the moon. This light came from somewhere else, holy, pure, unearthly. And then I heard it. A sound so deep it shook the marrow of my bones. A trumpet, ancient and commanding, rolling across the sky. It wasn't music as humans make. It was eternity breaking into time. The earth itself trembled as if creation was holding its breath. From the brilliance above, I saw angels emerging, vast and radiant, taking their stations like sentinels of light. Their faces were solemn yet filled with compassion. And then it happened. The homes I had seen glowing on the third day burst open with radiance. People were rising. Bodies once frail now glowed with unspeakable brilliance. Some were still on their knees, faces buried in prayer rugs, lifted up mid-sentence as tears streamed down their cheeks. Others reached their hands toward the heavens, their lips trembling with songs of praise. They were clothed in light, carried by an unseen force. And I heard the sound, voices rising in unison, not in one language, but in a harmony that needed no translation. Praise, joy, freedom. The song rolled across the sky like waves on an endless ocean. Jesus' voice thundered over it. I promised. And now I am fulfilling it. My children are coming home. But below, the sight broke my heart. Those left behind filled the streets, screaming in despair. Husbands clawed at the air where their wives had risen. Mothers collapsed, wailing for the children pulled from their arms. Teenagers pounded on church doors, only to find empty pews and silent altars. One man fell to his knees in the dust, sobbing, "Jesus, take me too." But the answer came, solemn and final. "I never knew you." Those words hit me harder than thunder. I realized this moment was not just celebration, it was justice. Every choice, every yes or no to God, had led to this separation. Heaven rejoiced, earth mourned. The contrast tore at me. Angels looked on, not in coldness but with compassion that burned like fire. And Jesus spoke again. Now begins what my prophets foretold for centuries. The line is drawn, the faithful rise, and the rest remain. As his words echoed, the vision burned into my soul. I couldn't look away. This was the fourth day, the day of fulfillment, and I knew it was only the beginning of what was still to come. The light faded, and suddenly, I gasped for air. My chest rose violently as if I had been pulled out of deep water. When my eyes opened, I wasn't in the vision anymore. I was lying flat on a hospital bed in Denver. Beeping monitors surrounded me, and the sharp smell of antiseptic filled the room. I could hear hurried voices, nurses rushing, and then a cry that cut through it all. "Mark, you're awake." Rachel was leaning over me, clutching my hand so tightly her knuckles were white. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Thank God, thank God," she whispered over and over. A doctor stood frozen at the foot of the bed, shaking his head in disbelief. His heart was gone for so long. He murmured, This is a miracle." I tried to speak, but my voice cracked, raw and weak. Instead, I just pulled Rachel closer, burying my face against her shoulder. The weight of what I had seen pressed heavy on me. Not fear, not shock, responsibility. Jesus had told me, "You have seen it, now go and tell them." The next few days were a blur of recovery. Doctors checked every chart, shook their heads, and admitted they had no explanation. Friends and family visited, but I barely spoke. How could I explain that while my body lay lifeless, my soul had seen eternity break into time? One night, still hooked to IVs, I asked Rachel to hand me my old Bible. The cover was worn, dust clinging to its edges. I hadn't opened it in years. As I flipped through, my eyes fell on Matthew chapter 24. 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken and the other left. My whole body shivered. It was exactly what I had witnessed. I turned to Joel chapter 2 verse 31. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. The memory of that suffocating darkness came rushing back. Then Luke chapter 21 verse 28. When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. It was all there, written centuries before, now alive before my eyes. As I read, a deep peace settled over me. I knew this wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't the brain's last flicker. It was real, a revelation, and I had been entrusted with it. The question wasn't if I would share, it was how. The vision still burned inside me, as clear as the day it happened. And I realized, keeping silent would be disobedience. If I stayed quiet, I'd be carrying the blood of others on my hands. That thought alone made me tremble, because I knew part of my mission was just beginning. Back home in Denver, after the hospital released me, life should have returned to normal. The doctors told me to rest, to take it easy, to be grateful for my second chance. But how could I live normally after what I had seen? Every time I closed my eyes, the vision returned, the 3 days of chaos, the silence, the trumpet, the separation. It burned in me like fire sealed in my bones. Rachel noticed it first. She said my prayers had changed. Before, they were short, distracted, mumbled at the dinner table. Now, they poured out of me like water from a broken dam, raw, urgent, desperate for people I knew and even for strangers I'd never met. She told me, "Mark, if God showed you this, then you can't keep it to yourself." I wrestled with fear. What would people think? My coworkers already whispered about me after hearing I died on the couch. Friends might laugh. Some might call me crazy. But then Jesus' words echoed in my heart. Better to be rejected by men than to be silent before me. That truth settled it. Silence was no longer an option. So I began. First, with my own family, Rachel, our 2 kids. I told them everything, every detail of the vision. Harper, our daughter, listened with wide eyes, clutching her Bible like it was treasure. Tom, just 7 years old, asked me, "Daddy, will Jesus take me too?" That question broke me, but I answered with trembling lips, "Yes, son, if you give him your heart." From there, I spoke to close friends. Some mocked, saying I was traumatized by my heart attack. Others listened quietly, their faces pale, their eyes glistening with tears. A few pulled me aside and whispered, "Mark, I've seen dreams like that too," but I was too afraid to tell anyone. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. God was showing the same warning to people all over the world. The burden grew heavier, but so did the urgency. Every headline I read, conflicts abroad, protests in the streets, storms tearing through towns. Felt like pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. I knew time was shorter than anyone wanted to admit, and I knew my mission was clear: warn, prepare, and point people back to Jesus. Even now, sharing this with you, my hands tremble, not from fear of mockery, but from the weight of knowing what's at stake. On the fourth day, the trumpet will sound, the faithful will rise, and many will be left pounding on locked doors. I don't want anyone, friend, neighbor, stranger, to be left behind. So I speak, not as a preacher, not as a prophet, but as a man who died on his living room floor and was given a glimpse of eternity. Jesus is at the door. The time to prepare is now. Please, don't wait for the sirens. By then, it will already be too late. Mark's story is more than a near-death experience. It is a wake-up call. The visions of darkness, silence, the trumpet, and the separation remind us that life is fragile, and eternity is real. We spend so much time worrying about bills, politics, or broken relationships, but in the end, the only question that matters is, are we ready to meet Jesus? His lesson is clear. Do not wait. Do not assume tomorrow is guaranteed. The vision showed that faith cannot be borrowed from a spouse, a parent, or a pastor. Each of us must choose for ourselves. And when the trumpet sounds, it will be too late to make that choice. For those who believe, the story is a call to courage. Do not stay silent. Share your faith, even if people mock you. For those still searching, it is a reminder that God's mercy is open now, but the door will not stay open forever.